Hey there, Stampers, and welcome back for the second card of Episode 7, I Miss Your Face, an online card class. Hopefully you've seen the other video, but if not, you can find it at RegalStamping.com in the post dated June 29th of 2020. My name is Krista Thomas, and I am an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator who is trying to provide inspiration and fun during the COVID-19 isolation. I don't know how much longer it will be before we can do local classes, but until then, hang in there with me and enjoy this class. So if you are interested in pre-cut card kits, you can find information for that on that same blog post from June 29th of 2020. And this is the second card in this episode 7. This card begins with a Misty Moonlight base, and we'll be using Tasteful Touches stamp set, as well as Forever Fern, which if you already saw the first card in this series, you will have seen this one in use. We're going to use a label from the Tasteful Label Dies pack. That's this one right here. And it bundles, these dies bundle with the Tasteful Touches. Okay. The Forever Fern stamp set has dies that coordinate with it as well, and we'll be using a couple, 2 or 3 of those. And then in our background, we're using a large background stamp called Buffalo Check. And I just think that this is great for masculine cards, but this card isn't masculine at all, and I think it goes great. And I know a lot of my customers already own it, so that's a bonus. You don't have to buy one more stamp set, right? Okay, I'm going to place these off to the side for a moment and show you that we will also be using the Tasteful Texture 3D embossing folder, and I don't know if you can kind of see that texture in there. It's very subtle, similar, well, a little bit more to it than the subtle embossing folder, but this is another one that will work for anything. I'm really liking it. And the ink pad colors that we'll be using are Calypso Coral, Night of Navy, and Basic Gray. So this is our final card, and let me tell you about the pieces that we'll be using for this card. So Misty Moonlight, like I already said, and that measures 8.5 by 5.5, and it's going to fold in half. You can see I have a little corner there that got damaged in the mailing of my package of new paper, but I am making do with it. I didn't want to call and complain because I think Stampin' Up! Does a really good job, and it was just a little bit of damage, so I'm using it. Okay, the next piece that we will need is Calypso Coral, measuring 4.5 by 2.5. Whisper White for the inside panel is 5 1/4 by 4 inches. You'll need some Whisper White scraps, one that you can cut the label from. I don't know if you can see that against the white. So you'll just need a piece of white big enough to cut this, and if you order my pre-cut kits, you're going to get all of these pieces already cut out for you. And then you'll need another piece of scrap of Whisper White for stamping on, and then we'll be doing some die cutting and some fussy cutting on this. Finally, you'll need a scrap of silver foil paper for some of these dies in here that we're going to add. So let's go ahead and get started and make this card. So first off, we want to go ahead and fold our card base in half. If you like to score first, that score line would be at 4 1/4, and give it a nice rub with a bone folder so that you get a nice crease. And then we're going to be stamping directly onto the card base with the Buffalo Check stamp, and we'll be using Night of Navy ink. Let me show you how I like to use these big background stamps. And I forgot to grab my scrap of placemat. Give me just a moment. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is just lay your stamp rubber side up and give it a good inking. Take the ink pad to the stamp. It's less messy and you can see that you've gotten it inked really well. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now, very carefully, I'm going to lay my card base on this. And I'm likely to get a little bit of ink on my fingernails from doing that. And then what I want to do is bring my placemat up and over, or bring in a scrap piece of paper and give it a massage. Just rub the whole thing down. Make sure that paper isn't moving on you. You don't want a smeared image. But by putting a piece of paper over the top and giving it a rub, you're not worried about getting your fingers all inky. Look at that. I am already inky. And with these big background stamps, it's very likely that if you were to just turn it over and push on it like we normally stamp, you would end up with a spot that didn't take. So there you go. And I will say that this stamp is a little bit finicky, so you do want to give it a really good impression, or some really good pressure and a good rub. You can see, if I bring this up a little closer, some of these areas that didn't get really good. You definitely want an inky ink pad. Make sure it's inked well. And then ink your stamp good and give it a good rub. So I'm coming in to clean all of that off. And I just use a wet wash rag, and I like white. I know that you're probably thinking that will never come out, but bleach does wonders. And I can see when my stamps are clean by using white. So there's that. So I'm going to put that aside now. My card base is ready. I'm going to try and get some of that ink off of my fingernails. All right, the next piece that we're going to work on is the Calypso Coral. We're going to use some Calypso Coral ink. And this particular stamp, which is from the Tasteful Touches, it's right here. And this is just going to be kind of a background look. And so a lot of this is going to get covered. So we're going to go like that and just call it good. Close this ink pad. And now we're going to give this piece a little bit of texture. It just adds a lot to the card. So let me bring in the Big Shot. And this is a 3D folder. So that means you need a special sandwich. I've got my big white base plate, and then the blue mat or cutting plate. It's not a cutting plate, it's just for using with 3D. In the new catalog, this is no longer blue, but it is still available. So you'll have to look for that. It'll say for use with 3D embossing folders. That gives you just the right pressure to run it through. And when we open it up, now we have some really cool texture on this piece. And a little bit of texture just always looks so nice. Okay, so I'm going to bring in the sample card here so you can see how we're starting to build our card. Let me see if I can get these in here. All right, next up we have our label already die cut. I have a fly in my craft room. Hopefully it's not going to come through the video here. Okay, Just Saying Hello is also from the Tasteful Touches stamp set. And I want this to be over towards the right. So I'm going to make sure that my stamp is off to the right, which leaves room for this foliage to come up the side. Okay, I will leave this ink pad open because we also need to stamp a flower Again, from the Tasteful Touches stamp set. We'll just go right there. And then the foliage from the Forever Greenery. Is that what it's called? I'm still Forever Fern. The designer paper is called Forever Greenery. I'm still learning my words. Okay. And I'll tell you, as I get older, it's harder and harder to remember the names of these things. What's with that? Okay, I'm going to show you that I've already die cut the silver pieces out using this particular die, which is part of that Forever Fern bundle. And then this particular piece we will be die cutting here in a moment. And then the little sprigs that are in here, right here, there are 4 of those dies in this set, which is wonderful if you're needing a whole bunch of little sprigs. You can cut them all in one pass through the Big Shot. I love that Stampin' Up! Is starting to do that with more and more of their die sets, cutting down on the time that we spend running things through. Okay, so those are ready to go, and we're going to go ahead and cut this out. So bringing the Big Shot back in, and then I will show you how I colored that flower. Make room here. Okay, this time we need our cutting plate, and that's the magnetic one that I like to use. A clear cutting plate, and then another clear one for the top. And let's just get that right in there, like that. I need to move things and run that through. Okay, and now we have our foliage piece. We'll get the Big Shot back over out of the way. And now I'm going to show you how I colored the flower. Let me put that back in my dish. This magnetic bowl is the most wonderful thing next to my Big Shot. I no longer lose dies, especially things like these little guys. You can find them at Harbor Freight. If you don't have a local Harbor Freight, you can order them, I'm assuming, online from Amazon or somewhere like that. But they are so wonderful. And if you have a mechanic for a husband, he may already have one of those, and perhaps you could snag it from him. All right, so now we're going to use Petal Pink Stampin' Blend markers. These are Stampin' Up's alcohol-based marker. And the Petal Pink, it's a very pale, peachy pink color. I'm going to start with the light, and you're just going to watch how quick and easy this is. I am just scribbling, basically, scribbling it in. It doesn't have to be completely filled in, but if it bothers you, you certainly can take your time with it. And just kind of like that. Get that one there. Okay, now we're going to come in with the Petal Pink Dark, and I like to use the fat end of the marker for this project. I just feel like it doesn't take as much time. And we're going to go in and just do a little flicking at the base of each petal where the shadowing is drawn in by the Stampin' Up! Artist. So that's very helpful. And just when I say flick, I'm talking about flicking, starting here and flicking away from you in very short strokes, because you don't want to cover the whole petal. We are just adding some shadowing. And if you feel more comfortable with the smaller tip, that works too. And I rotate my flower around so that I'm always flicking away from me. So some of these petals that the shadowing is at the top, like this one was, it's just easier. See, I just did it pulling to me, but it's much easier to flick away from you. So you can see that with the smaller tip, it takes a little bit longer, but That's not always bad. It gives you perhaps a little more control than the larger tip. So it's just whatever you're comfortable with. Personally, I like the big one. And we just finish up like this. Now, unfortunately, this flower does not have a die, but if you take just a moment and look at the outside edge of it, it is not hard to fussy cut. I can hear some of you right now moaning because I'm making you fussy cut, but it's really not. It's not difficult. You can do it. So I'm going to leave the center just white with the gray ink. And now I'm going to bring in my scissors, and see, that's not a difficult cut. You can do it. I always like to leave just a little bit of a white edge. I do not cut right on the stamped edge. I just leave a little bit of a white border. And some of you I know love to fussy cut. For me, it's very therapeutic. I could sit and just fussy cut for hours and it wouldn't bother me a bit. You do have to find scissors that are comfortable for you. These are the Stampin' Up! Paper snips. And quite honestly, while I love these scissors and they are very sharp, the scissors that I prefer to fussy cut with are my Fiskars, and I don't know what these are called, but you squeeze the handle together. And for me, see, I get a bump there from these scissors. They're just too tight. I guess I have plump fingers. So these, there's no pressure on my fingers. They do take a little bit of time to get used to, but once you get used to them, I think you will love them. They do still make these, but I've had these for close to 20 years. And my little signature zebra print tape is there so that if I'm in class and somebody borrows, I know that this particular pair is mine. So that's what that is if you ever see it in my videos. Okay, so now we've got that all done and we are ready to assemble. So let's get all of our pieces in here. So the first thing we're going to do is glue this Calypso Coral piece, and we want it centered from top to bottom and maybe half an inch or so from over from the left. Let me get some of this gunk off of here. It was bugging me in the last video. Okay, let's get that glued. So like this, roughly like that. When you stamp this buffalo stamp for the background, make sure you have it straight. It's really obvious if it's going off kilter. So that's just a tip that I forgot to tell you when I was stamping it. All right, the next thing that's going down is the label that says just saying hello. And we want it to be roughly half an inch from the bottom of the Calypso Coral and then almost over, so maybe 1/4 of an inch from the right side edge. And we're just going to glue this flat. We will do some popping things up with dimensionals here in a minute or two, but this one is going flat. Okay, so something like that. Now we're going to come in with our large silver piece and we want it to kind of go up like that. The stem and all of that with this one is going to go over it a little like that. And you do want to make sure that none of these leaves go off the edge, because when you go to put this in an envelope, it will make a difference. So kind of play with placement before you commit with glue. You can go off the edge of the Calypso Coral, or you can keep it down in it, so it's whatever you like. And you do want that stem on the silver piece to be covered though, I think. You don't want that showing. So I think that that's a good placement for those. And then this flower will come in, so you do want to kind of check and make sure that that you're not going to have to put the flower high where you're going to cover your word. So again, play with placement so that you know where you're going with it. And then to glue this foliage down, I'm going to use my silicone mat and an Elmer's dotted tape runner. This is not like your snail adhesive. It has little tiny dots on it. And when you use an intricate die and then go to glue it down, you know that it's kind of hard to put glue just where you want it. This, as long as it's on top of your silicone mat, you can just run it right across, and those dots will only stick to the paper and the mat, but you won't have the slime of the snail adhesive in between. So this is my trick for gluing intricate things down, and the Elmer's dotted runner you can find at Walmart. They're very inexpensive, and if you can find them, because they sell out quick. I always say buy a few refill packages. They come 2 refills to a package. Have some extras on hand. I know that's not a Stampin' Up! Product, and I've asked them to please carry it. But so far, it hasn't happened. Okay, so now I think I will go ahead and put this one right there, and this one has room for glue, so I'm not going to use the dotted tape runner for this. And I don't really need to worry about that stem because the flower is going to cover that here in a minute. So again, I want to make sure I don't go off the left side. So something like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my flower in, popping it up with some dimensionals, and then I will tuck these little sprigs in where I want them. And I will use the dotted tape runner for that. So for this, I want to put a few pop dots on. You don't want too many, otherwise when you go to push those little sprigs under, the dimensionals will stop. It will stop you from pushing it in. You'll hit them. So don't get crazy with too many dimensionals. A few, 2 or 3, will definitely hold your flower just where you want it. So I think I like that, just like that. And now with these little sprigs, I am going to use my tweezers, and that just makes it easier for me to pop those in. So 2 of them will go up here and 1 will go down here. So let's go ahead and move this over and bring in my silicone mat again. And you can clean your silicone mat by washing it in the sink with your dishes, if you still do dishes that way. Or you can run some soapy water and just do it. You could use some Goo Gone on it. I've heard other things, and right now I can't think of what they are. But the glue does come off of this. You can also rub it off if you care to sit and do that. So those silicone mats are very handy. Okay, so that is 2. Oh, I put that away too soon. Now let's get this one in there, and just like that. There. Okay, now I want to show you another sample just like this one, but I added, well, I did a couple things differently. I just dropped it on the floor. I added some of the champagne rhinestones. I'm not going to include those in the pre-cut kits because they are back ordered right now and I don't have enough. The other difference on this is that I used a new die cut, and doggone it if I can't think of the name of it right now, and I don't have my catalog handy, but it goes with the Many Mates stamp set. It's part of that bundle, and I don't know if you can see how intricate that die is, and I just sponged I cut it out and of the same color as the background, the Misty Moonlight. And then I used a sponge with some Misty Moonlight and rubbed it over here and there to just darken it up a little bit. And then I used the silicone mat and the dotted tape runner to get it glued down. So, because otherwise it would be very intricate to glue. So that's how I did the background on that. So that is an option if you have that, or if you want to get it and try that background. Otherwise, the buffalo check, I think, is a good alternative. Okay, and if you have some bling and you want to use it on your card, you can see how that looks. But for the sake of our card kits, I will not be including those. Okay, now we need to do the inside of the card. And so we need that white panel that is the final piece. And we're going to go in with Calypso Coral ink and that foliage stamp that we did on the coral panel here. And I'm just going to do, just kind of coming in off the side like that. And just saying hello on the front. I think I will just leave the inside blank. I've been doing that more and more these days because when I need a card to send to somebody, and if I've already stamped a sentiment on the inside, sometimes it just isn't quite what I want to say for that particular person. So I find I can either stamp something later or I can write something later. And that seems to be working really well for me. So if you find that you're in that situation too, and the image or the sentiment that you stamped on the inside is just not quite right, consider just leaving the words off of it until it's time to use it. All right, so that was our second card for Episode 7, I Miss Your Face, an online card class. I hope you liked it, and I hope that you love that Forever Fern stamp set and dies, as well as this Tasteful Touches. I think that the two work really well together, and you've got some really neat sayings and textures in here as well. So between the two of those, I think we've got a winner. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time.